there's fresh scrutiny for police in Uvalde, Texas, as a 911 dispatch call appears to confirm officers were told the gunman was in a room full of victims as they stood outside.
You have a child online. Child is advising he is in a room full of victims at this moment.
Well, Lydia Morales, along with her mother Monica, cared for many of the victims at their daycare centre when they were just toddlers. They now set up a memorial, 21 chairs with each of the names of each of the children and the 2 teachers who were killed on a white piece of paper. And Lydia joins me now. Lydia, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I can't even imagine what it must be like for all of you connected with this school and these poor children who were murdered. You had, I think, over 10 of these kids come through your daycare centre. When you first heard what had happened, what were your feelings?
I was really in shock. I didn't think this could happen, especially to a small community. When we actually heard what was going on, we locked down our daycare center just to ensure the safety, just because there was a lot of commotion going on, especially because our daycare is actually located by, if I'm not mistaken, it's Dalton Elementary. So there was just a lot of commotion going on at that time. And so, you know, just for safety protocol, we locked down our daycare center and hoping that we kept the safety for everybody.
It must have been agonizing for you to discover that so many of the children who'd been at your daycare centre had actually been killed.
Yes, it was.
And I also know, Lydia, that
it's hard to think that these families are not going to be able to hold that they're not going to be able to hold their child ever again.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incomprehensible atrocity. It's not a tragedy, because a tragedy implies somehow this, you know, this was accidental or something. This is a deliberate annihilation of young children by an 18-year-old who just decided to destroy their lives. I know that you were also personally close to Mrs. Garcia, one of the 2 teachers who died. She actually taught you. So this is very personal for you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. She actually did. She was my 3rd grade teacher here at the school right behind me, Robb Elementary. I was here probably when I was like 10 as well, so a good 12 years ago. I walked these same halls that the tragedy took place.
Lydia, what is your feeling? There's a huge debate raging now about guns, about mental health, about all sorts of issues which may have contributed to this. What is the feeling, do you think, of the community about what's happened here?
I think a lot of it needs to change, at least with the gun violence. It needs to change, and mental health needs to be taken seriously, and not just as a walk-in talk thing. It needs to be where you need to sit down with that person, talk about what's going on with them, talk about their past history, especially even now more so with the tragedy that took place here.
I mean, there's always been a debate after all of these massacres in America about gun control, you know, taking some guns away from certain types of people. It does seem strange to us here in the UK, for example, that an 18-year-old can't buy a beer until they're 21, but they can buy a semi-automatic rifle. Do you think that something like that ought to change, that kids, young people, teenagers should not be able to get these kind of guns?
I do believe something does need to change because, like you were saying, how your laws are different from here from the United States. Here they could buy a beer at 21, but they could buy legal guns and stuff at 18 years old. It just doesn't seem right. Especially, even now more so that this tragedy took place that involved, you know, guns taking the life of 21 people.
You've done this wonderful little tribute of these chairs. What was it that made you want to do that in particular?
We just wanted to show our support for the community, especially during this tragic time, especially for the families. I noticed right now, too, we have more people putting out bears, they're putting flowers, they're putting the little rocks that have messages and stuff in hopes that with all this stuff, we will be able to give it to their families as a, you know, as a reminder that we're all here together in Uvalde and we're standing strong for one another.
And Lydia, is there anger amongst the local community about the way the police conducted themselves? There's a big debate now that there were 19 police with guns in the school and they didn't go in for over an hour.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I just wondered what your view is of the debate about the failure of the police to go into the classroom, given they were in the school for over an hour.
I do believe there is some anger around the community, but at the same time, you know, everybody's trying to hold together, at least to be strong for the families of these lives that were taken.
Yeah, I completely understand. Lydia, thank you so much for joining me. It's just unbearable to think what has happened there, and the fact that you knew 10 of these children who'd come through your day centre, the fact you used to be taught by one of the teachers who died, it must be particularly unbearable for you, and I'm incredibly grateful to you for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Beyond comprehension, but I'm joined now by Chris Grollnek. He's a retired police officer, an active shooter prevention expert, and Fox Nation host Tomi Lahren. Welcome to both of you. Let me start with you, Chris, if I may. You're a specialist in this very kind of scenario. You know, I wrote a column for the New York Post yesterday, just lambasting what happened here as, I'm afraid, cowardice. I mean, the idea that 19 armed police were in that school for over an hour and didn't go into that classroom is, to me, unconscionable.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Piers, and hello, Tomi. Great to see you again. For this tragedy, I wish we weren't speaking about this. However, what we've seen is we've spent about $10 million since Sandy Hook on training approximately 140,000 police on response tactics of how to respond to an active shooter. And we see, after a similar Pulse, Parkland, Uvalde, and there's several others, they're not responding appropriately. And there's no excuse for this one. And I have, you know, I'm not just speaking out of my mouth. I've been in an active shooter in real time as a policeman, where somebody just decides they're going to start shooting at you, and they attack you, and you have no call, so you have to react. This is different. Domestic soil. Well, these are children. I don't really speak about children, but there's a message to be evangelized here, and that is we have to change a lot, not just a binary choice of guns or mental health. We have to evaluate the whole spectrum and decide who we're talking to.
Right. I mean, I think, Tomi, you know, you and I have talked about guns before. I don't want to re-legislate that debate. What strikes me about this particular 2-week period, you've had the mass shooting in Buffalo, where 10 black people were murdered by a white supremacist in a supermarket. You've now had 19 children annihilated in their classroom, exactly the same as what happened in Sandy Hook 10 years ago. And we know nothing got changed. And it's not as simple as saying, take all the guns away. There are too many guns in America to do that. And also there is a constitutional right, which I know a lot of Americans feel strongly about their right to bear arms. And we just don't have that kind of issue here. So I'm not going to legislate that with you. I'm just curious, you know, what can be done here? There were, you know, the normal response from the pro-gun lobby is, well, you need to have more guns so that good guys with guns can stop it. But we had 19 supposed good guys with guns in the school hallway doing nothing. So that can't be the answer.
Well, I think that we have to look at this situation apart from other situations where law enforcement did fail here. And I am a big advocate and supporter of law enforcement, but we have to take a look at the situation. There's going to be an investigation, and the people of that community and the people of the world deserve to know what happened, what lapse in communication occurred there, and what went so wrong. going back to the discussion about guns, what we do to address this issue, it is an issue of mental health as well, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But I would also say this, when we're talking about our constitutional rights, making law-abiding citizens helpless and outgunned does not make evil people any less harmful. So that is a discussion that needs to be had, but also mental health. When you look at individuals like this, there is a common thread and pattern. These individuals are on social media platforms, on different chat rooms, torturing animals, abusing animals, talking about violence, talking about how they want to harm people. Why is there not a mechanism to report this? The world is watching these individuals promise to do harm, and nothing is done, and nothing is said.
Tomi,
and Piers, I would also say...
Yeah, I would say, look, I agree there are a number of things at play here. Mental health is clearly a massive problem. These are evil, twisted people, and they all seem to be getting younger and younger, and it's incredibly worrying. I know that the Sandy Hook shooter, for example, and this shooter both had a weird obsession with Call of Duty, which is a video game where you play a lone shooter. Right? Is there no connection between that and mental illness and the ready availability of guns? I'm sure there is a connection. There are lots of things going on here, but I think the rest of the world looks at these incidents in America happening time and time again and just wonders whether anything will actually be done about guns themselves. And what do you think the answer is? I mean,
Kurt.
when I asked the lady earlier, you know, this guy couldn't buy a beer till he was 21. Americans accept that. They accept that. They accept regulation when they drive cars, which can be dangerous. But why was he able to get a semi-automatic rifle?
May I just interject on one thing, Piers? Because I do think it's a simple question.
Chris wants to jump in as well.
Okay, Chris, yeah.
I apologize. So we know that 100% of active shooters and mass killers share a common trait out of a number of common traits. The problem with that benchmark is me and you share at least one of those traits. Maybe we've been wronged in our whole life. Maybe we had whatever the problem is. So if we throw that metric out and we look at one statistic that the FBI has put out in 21 years, 47.3% of active shooters telegraph that they're going to be active shooters, and yet they still legally purchase firearms.
Right.
That's where I tell you, I agree.
I think the lack of. I think if I could jump in, Chris, I think the lack of proper red flag spotting. You know, every single time stuff comes out about these shooters, you think, well, why didn't that get picked up? Why wasn't that shown on their background check when they go and get these guns legally? But Tomi, you wanted to answer before Chris stepped in there.
Yes.
When I agree with Chris wholeheartedly, we also need to address some of the cultural issues that we have in the United States of America. And it's not just gun culture. It's also a culture of fatherlessness. It's a culture of young people falling through the cracks. And I'm glad that Chris is talking about some of these traits, because you don't see young women doing this. You see young men doing this, young men who are incredibly angry, young men who often share that common thread of not having fathers or parents in the household that are raising them correctly. So we're going to have to address a whole litany of issues. It's not just the gun. I know it's easy to go after the weapon, but there are millions of Americans who own firearms and who own what they call assault weapons, and they don't go out and they don't become mass shooters. They use them for home defense and protection. So there's bigger issues to be discussed here besides just the weapon, important issues that are a little bit more challenging, and that's why I feel that so many fail to address them.
I think it is a very complex issue in America. You know, when Britain got rid of its guns after the Dunblane massacre in the 90s, we were not a gun culture country. Most people in Britain did not have a gun to start with. So it was a much easier thing to do and a much easier thing for all sides of the political divide to agree with. So it's very complicated in America. I completely accept that. Listen, got to leave it there. Chris, Tomi, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you both.
Thank you.